welcome back. Like I did mention, we will be having conversations about climate change. This definitely will be a continuation from last week, where I had a member of the Nigerian Conservation Foundation, Mr. Solomon, speaking about climate change and how it's been affecting us here in Nigeria. For those who may not know, and I have described this on several occasions, saying that climate change is that long-term alteration of the Earth's temperature and weather patterns primarily caused by human activities, meaning we all play a role in climate change. And this has led to widespread ecological, social, and economic impacts. Today, my guest, who is an education advocate that is passionate about women's rights and development. She works as the communications associate for Bridge Connect Africa Initiative, which is an NGO based in Kano, focused on women's rights to education, good health, and climate action. She is an African activist for climate justice, working with education as a vaccine as an implementing partner for the AACJ project in Nigeria. Now, through this project, together with 15 other female climate advocates, they have mobilized pairs to become co-advocates for climate justice, collectively driving conversations on social media platforms. She is dedicated to promoting climate justice, gender equality, and quality education. Now, through community programs, digital campaigns, she has led efforts that empower women, girls, and young people to lead a dignified life. Her name is Juliet Nwobodo. Good afternoon, Juliet. How's it going?
Hi, Ethe. Nice to be here.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Well,
Thank you so much for joining me on this conversation today. And I must commend all the work that you have done, which has been very evident. You know, I did mention that you are very passionate about women's rights and development. You're passionate about education, which plays a key role in making a difference in this conversation about climate change. So I must commend all the work that you do.
thank you very much. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Now let's just move into it, because we want to talk about particularly how climate change affects marginalized groups, focusing on women in particular. And I want to know, you know, with your experience in climate change activism, how does climate change specifically impact marginalized communities here in Nigeria? And I really want you to tell us what are some of those challenges that are faced by women in these communities.
Okay. Thank you once again for the opportunity. So, when we talk about how climate change affects marginalized community, taking a look at some communities, we see that they are usually climate crisis prone. And when I say prone to climate crisis, you see these communities are prone to flooding, they are prone to drought, and this might not be their fault in a way, because there are different types of way in which climate change can happen. It can be man-made, of course, which we cause by ourselves, let's say because of due to improper waste management and stuff like that. And then there's a natural climate effect, and it affects people living in marginalized communities, because unlike we that stay in urban areas where there is infrastructure, these people living in marginalized community do not have those infrastructures. And now, streamlining it down to women, we notice that women living in rural communities are mostly farmers. They mostly work in the agricultural sector, right? They have farming, they have farms in which they just go to farm and then take care of their families. This affects them in a way. Let's say in times of flooding, right? They lose their land, they lose their crops. Some of these women, their crops are even at the peak of harvest, and they lose it. They lose their source of income. And it really affects them. And then looking at the gender inequalities of a lot of things that are happening in some places, in some communities, women are not allowed to own land, right? And then if they get a little land that they farm on and they lose it, getting another land will be very, very difficult for them. And it is really difficult for women navigating these processes. A lot of women are not in decision-making processes. Take a look at the various seats in the House of Reps, Senate. We see very few women. And if women are not really represented, when it comes to issues that affect women, we see the men speaking on our behalf. Why these issues are affecting women, so women are not there to represent other women who are going through issues like that. And so that's how climate crisis affects marginalized communities. One, because they do not have the infrastructures needed to navigate climate crisis. We see when climate crisis happen, people are displaced from their homes.
Wow.
Mind you that they do not have other homes to stay, and so you see them ending up in IDP camps. Like if you have been to IDP camps, I think one time I posted a picture of an IDP camp. If you have been there, you see that life there is nothing anybody could dream about. But they do not have a choice. They do not have other homes. So this is how climate change affects marginalized communities, but also it affects women more.
That's very terrible. It's heartbreaking, and I do understand that you work in a particular area in Nigeria that I believe has been prone to a whole lot of disadvantages, especially when it comes to security, insecurity now with climate change and how it's affecting those sorts of communities. And I really wonder what has been done. We do understand that the government does have a budget when it comes to addressing the issue of climate change and the effects of climate change. I want to know what the initiatives, based on your experience, and I know that you're very heavy on activism. So what are the initiatives that or the projects that have taken place in these areas or in Nigeria in general that help to empower these women in marginalized communities to actually combat the impacts of climate change?
Okay, so I think I'll start with the AACJ project, of course, which I'm part of, African Activists for Climate Justice. The implementing partner here in Nigeria is Education as a Vaccine, and but the global partner is Femnet program. This project aims to have I think in Nigeria we are about 15 advocates, social media advocates. We understand the power of social media, and we leverage on that to advocate for climate justice. What we do is we create social media activities targeting stakeholders. Let's say the Ministry of Environment, the major stakeholders on climate change. We target them with our post and we tell them this is what is happening. This is what we found out that is happening in this community. This is how climate change is affecting this community. What have you done? What is your ministry doing to ensure that we mitigate the effect of climate justice? This is how we keep stakeholders in check, because this is the commitments that they have made. They made a commitment in mitigating climate crisis or climate issues. So they need people to hold them accountable. And that's what the AACJ project is all about. And then we also have the Women's Economic Empowerment Program. It's called WPE. It's an initiative that focuses on promoting economic independence for women. They provide them with training, resources, opportunities to start their own businesses and secure better employment. So for instance, women in communities who are only farmers, when the issues of climate crisis happen and they lose the opportunities they have with their farming, with the trainings and the resources they have received, they can be able to start a business or maybe a side hustle to help them until they are able to overcome this issue, or until they are able to go back to their farms.
Yeah.
And then we have the Global Gender and Climate Alliance, GGCA. It works to integrate gender into climate change policies and programs. You know, I made mention of how women are not usually represented in
Exactly.
upper positions, in positions where they make everything has to do with decision making processes. And if decision making processes are not carrying women along, then we have less gender, we have less women integrated and programming. So this project is particularly about policies and programs that they advocate for gender responsive approach to climate action.
Right.
They ensure that women's rights and interests are always taken into action. Then we also have the UN Women's Empowerment Principles. It's the WEPS. It guides businesses on how to promote gender equality and empower women in their workplaces and communities by implementing principles that support women economic empowerment. Basically, that's what it's about. And there are other projects that I
I'm
can
sure
keep
they are.
mentioning.
And you know what? I'm
There are
very
other
impressed because, you know, a lot of times when we even bring up these conversations about climate change, it's still very foreign in Nigeria because you hear
yes.
people say things like, I beg, Jerry, you know, have I eaten yesterday? Have I eaten today? You know, there are other pressing issues that I'm experiencing on a daily basis. Now you're talking about climate change, you know, the way sometimes climate change may have been packaged. It could be according to the media, people see it as a Western problem. They don't see
Yeah,
it as an issue affecting us
we
here in Nigeria or here in Africa. But like you've rightly mentioned, you know, especially when it comes to agriculture, agriculture is a big part of our culture
it
in
is.
Nigeria. This is something
It
that I know that a
is.
lot of people feed from. This is what they're able to take care of their families from. And if we do not have the right conditions, it would definitely affect, you know, the progress of agriculture, thereby, unfortunately, causing people to move into a form of unemployment. So, and we already know that we
Yeah.
have an unemployment issue in Nigeria already. How much more
Yeah.
these other avenues being affected? So, yes, I think it's very commendable that we have a lot of these initiatives. Now, I want you to talk to us because I know that you're passionate about education. What
Yeah.
role does education and awareness play in, you know, just empowering women to just take up an active role in climate action within their communities?
Okay, I think in this instance, I'd like to use myself as an example, like like a case study. So
Yeah.
initially, I didn't really know about, I knew about climate because, of course, we were taught in civic education, in geography, we were taught about it, but it was just on a theoretical level, just read and pass exams, of course. And the curriculum did not really capture what climate change is really, really all about. So that was just the basic knowledge I knew about climate change and all. So growing up, I knew how to, I knew that disposing waste is okay, but because of the way everyone disposes their waste, I would just come, maybe take anything plastic, I throw it on the road. Of course, everybody is doing it and stuff like that. But when I became conscious of what climate change is really, and I started reading about it, and I said looking it up, I found out that these little things that we do actually affects us as individuals, as a country, as a state. And since then, I have been really, really conscious. I have been really, really conscious of the things that I do when it comes to climate change. So right now, I do not take a plastic and throw it on the road. I now know that plastic needs to be reused. I now know that it needs to be recycled. I now understand why I now even understand why, if you look at a plastic bottle, you will see that recycling sign on it. I really
Exactly.
did know. I really I didn't really not know what it meant. So I think that education is really important, because if you think education is expensive, of course, try ignorance. I see how, especially in the north where things are being littered, and see what thing that littering does. When we do it during the when it's not normal seasons, we litter and everything, it gets clogged and everything. Then during the rainy season, it's raining season currently here in Kano State, and oh my God, is a mess.
Oh
It's a
no.
mess in so many places. So imagine that we took action, conscious efforts, little actions to ensure that wastes are disposed properly and waste are recycled. We won't be experiencing some of the things that we now experience now,
And
right? So
okay, carry
education
on.
is really important, because when people are aware, they begin to make conscious efforts, like little conscious efforts. It doesn't have to be so big.
I like that you said little conscious effort. So your everyday life, you know, the decisions that you make a long-term difference as well in the environment and the society that we're living for our kids yet unborn. Now you did mention it is rainy season here in Lagos, and yeah, it's quite messy, and unfortunately we've gotten so used to it. But I really wonder, in Kano State that you are at the moment, how have you guys, you know, been managing and mitigating the situation? Now it's rainy season, what's going on? Like, how are you able to manage given the adverse condition that this is bringing?
Yeah. Okay. So I think there is this compulsory like the compulsory sanitation that goes on every Saturday. I think it has been happening for close to 2 years. So every last Saturday of the month, individuals are expected not to go out before 10 a.m.
Mm.
So from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. you're expected to do some basic environmental sanitation, clean up your homes, clean up your environment and stuff like that. But then again, it's a good approach, but it is not really
Yeah,
it's not really effective, because some people take out that time to just rest and sleep and say, okay, when it's
absolutely.
10 a.m. let's go to work. And so I do know about I don't know the plans that the new government have currently in place when it comes to climate action, but I think there are organizations like Bridge Connect, for instance, here in Kano is already coming up with programming as regards climate actions, and basically most especially to educate young people on the role that they play. So we are looking at what the new government have for us when it comes to climate change, but also we are looking at raising advocates who can also keep these governments in check for their promises. We have a board, it's called Remasab, it's an environmental board, like it's a big thing, but they don't really utilize it. I used to tell my friends that they have an environmental board here in Kano State, like very big, but I feel like it is underutilized. So
Mm.
I think yeah, it's time for government to start utilizing these processes in ensuring that our environments are of course clean. And it's also this is an opportunity for me to also call out individuals,
Yeah.
organizations, that if you think that climate change is not happening, then look around you and see what's going on. It is time for us to start putting in climate practices, climate programs in all of our programming. I
I
think
love
that would
that.
help.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for the information that you've shared so far. Now, I really want to know, have you seen any success stories or maybe inspiring examples of women-led climate initiatives that you probably would like to, highlight?
Okay. I think that's where I also call, of course, that's why I also call AACJ.
Okay.
Yes, because first I'm proud of it. Yes, in a way we have gotten some kind of attention, especially from stakeholders. Sometimes we organize activities and we make sure that we target stakeholders and say you guys have to be here. So I think AACGA is one project that I know that since its implementation, it has had a lot of effect. More people are educated. We are now calling climate stakeholders. We are putting them in check, telling them what they should do and stuff like that. So there are also other organizations. I think I've heard of Surge Africa. Yes, and there are also people are now going more into recycling, like as a full-time business now.
Absolutely. I have seen
Before, yeah, I think before recycling was seen as an ordinary man's business, like a dirty business. But I see a lot of people now going into recycling, and I think it's really quite commendable.
That's fantastic. I would have to wrap this up soon, but I just want to know because I also want it to be that we're encouraging people to get into this move, against climate change and how it's affecting us negatively in this side of the world. Now, are there other ways that you believe that we could foster greater collaboration and partnerships between, these different stakeholders to actually address the unique challenges that are being faced by marginalized women in the context of climate change?
Of course, yes. Everyone has a role to play. Individuals, organizations, government, everyone has a role to play. So I think first of all, when it comes to budgeting, I think they should include climate programming they should have a budget for
Okay.
climate. It's not something that we leave to chances. So first of all, when it comes to the government should have a robust budget and have a plan. If these budgets are being if these funds are being disbursed, how is it being utilized, right? So then when it comes to organization should be able to come up with programmings that can be evaluated, that can be monitored, so that we can see the progress. And also collaboration is key, very very important. If an organization is working on education and this organization is working on climate, I think it's time that we come together and take
Mhm.
our the different ideas that we have, share it together, and then come up with something on climate action, climate education. And very important in education, teachers, especially primary secondary school, should try to include climate change in the curriculum. Yes, because
Wow.
when students are being taught at an early stage, there should be a curriculum specifically. If there should be a climate education on its own, please let us start educating people. Like I said, for me, I really had a little knowledge based on geography, and
Yes.
I think, I don't know if it's my school, but my friends also say the same thing, right? Everything I know about climate change now is as a result of research, reading. So if we include it in the curriculum and teach students at an early stage, they begin to make conscious efforts. And then for we that have, of course, grown up, we should also find things that we can do now. If you have an idea that you can pitch that will help combat climate crisis and also carry
Mhm.
women along, please do. And also for women in marginalized communities, if there are way to empower them, give them business grants, if there are way to make sure that women can own lands without struggling, I think it's really important for us to start considering women in decision making processes. It is time for us to start educating women. It is time for us to start protecting women. I forgot to say that when climate crisis happen,
Mhm.
women and girls are displaced and they are most likely prone to gender-based violence because of course they have
Absolutely.
lost their homes, they
Yes.
are in the streets. And yes, so we should really carry women along in decision making
Mhm.
processes. Yeah, so there's an intersection,
Wow.
of course, between
Juliet, thank you
climate.
so much. You have enlightened us a whole lot.
Thank
This
you.
conversation about climate change is one that I've never really had before. Just going so in depth as to how really it is affecting women. When we hear, oh, women are more marginalized and there's a disproportionate effect, people just think it's like the regular, oh, women are always coming out with woe is me. But you have detailed it, taking a look at our source of income, source of livelihood, majorly, which is agriculture for a lot of women in rural areas as well. And the weather, the change in the climate is affecting their source of livelihood. Thank you very much for all the details that you've shared with us. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Juliet Nwobodo, who is an education advocate that is very passionate about women's rights and development. You could hear the passion in her voice, and she works as the communications associate for Bridge Connect Africa Initiative, which is an NGO based in Kano State, focused on women's right to education, good health, and also climate action. Juliet, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. All right,
Thank
there
you.
you have it. That is all.